Welcome to Story Planet, where we bring you soothing tales to help you unwind. Tonight's story is The Tea Maker's Cottage, a peaceful journey into a world of fragrant teas, simple joys, and the warmth of a quiet life in the countryside. So settle in with your favorite cup, get cozy, and let this calming story carry you to a place of serenity and gentle wonder. Now, let's begin. In the heart of a misty valley, nestled among rolling hills dotted with wildflowers, stood a quaint stone cottage. Its thatched roof was mossy and green, blending seamlessly into the serene landscape. A thin plume of smoke curled from the chimney, carrying the scent of herbs and the promise of warmth. This was the tea maker's cottage, a place where time seemed to stand still, and every visitor found more than just a cup of tea. Maeve, the tea maker, had lived in the cottage for as long as anyone in the valley could remember. Stories of her origins were as mysterious as the woman herself. Some said she had wandered into the valley as a young woman, carrying nothing but a satchel of seeds and a small teapot, drawn by the whispers of the land. Others believed she had always been there, a timeless guardian of the valley's secrets. Maeve's connection to the land was unparalleled. She seemed to understand its rhythms in a way no one else could. The hills, the flowers, and the very mist of the valley seemed to respond to her presence, as if acknowledging her as part of its essence. Despite her quiet demeanor, those who spoke with Maeve often left feeling they had shared their thoughts with someone who had seen and understood lifetimes beyond their own. She was a woman of quiet wisdom, her hair silver as moonlight and her eyes as deep and kind as the forest pond. Her hands, though weathered from years of tending her garden and crafting her brews, moved with a gentle precision that made each cup of tea feel like an art form. It was said that Maeve could brew a tea to match any mood, heal any heart, or unlock long-forgotten dreams. Maeve's garden was a marvel in itself, a patchwork of vibrant greens and blooms that spilled over the stone walls like a painter's palette come to life. Lavender swayed in the breeze, filling the air with its calming fragrance. Mint and chamomile nestled together like old friends, their leaves glistening with dew. In the far corner, under the shade of an ancient oak, grew a mysterious herb with silver-veined leaves that seemed to shimmer in the moonlight. Maeve called it Dreamweaver, and she reserved it for her most special blends. Each morning Maeve walked among the garden paths, the hem of her linen dress brushing against the dew-kissed grass. The woven basket in her hand filled steadily with sprigs of rosemary, blossoms of chamomile, and tender leaves of mint. She paused at each plant, murmuring quiet words of gratitude as if the herbs themselves could understand. The act of gathering wasn't just a routine, but a ritual, a moment of connection between Maeve and the land she nurtured. By mid-morning, the garden buzzed with life, the soft hum of bees mingling with the songs of birds, creating a symphony as natural as the air she breathed. The tea maker's cottage was never empty for long. Visitors came from across the valley and beyond, drawn by the whispers of Maeve's magical brews. These whispers carried tales of transformation and solace, spreading like the gentle flow of a stream to nearby hamlets and distant travelers. They spoke of teas that could heal broken spirits, reveal forgotten dreams, and even unlock paths long thought closed. Many first heard of the cottage through a neighbor's hushed recounting of their visit or from a bard who had woven Maeve's legend into a melody. The whispers intrigued because they offered something intangible, a promise of connection and renewal that no other place seemed to provide. The allure wasn't just the tea, but the profound stillness and understanding Maeve seemed to impart, leaving those who heard the tales compelled to experience it for themselves. Each visitor brought with them a story, a burden, or a question. Maeve welcomed them all with the same quiet smile, inviting them to sit by the hearth while she prepared their tea. One day, a young woman named Eliza arrived at the cottage, her steps hesitant yet hopeful. She carried a leather satchel and an air of restlessness. "I've been traveling for days," she said, her voice tinged with exhaustion. "I'm not sure what I'm looking for, but I hoped you might help me find it." Maeve studied her with kind eyes and nodded. "Let's see what the tea has to say," she replied. She moved to her shelves, each jar labeled in elegant script, and selected a handful of herbs. Eliza watched as Maeve blended the tea, her movements deliberate and calming. The brew filled the room with a soft floral aroma, and when Eliza took her first sip, she felt a warmth that went beyond the physical. As the fire crackled in the hearth, Eliza began to share her story. She spoke of a dream she had abandoned, a path she feared was no longer open to her. Maeve listened without interruption, her presence a steady anchor. When Eliza finished, Maeve handed her a small pouch of the blend and said, "The path is still there, waiting for you. This tea will remind you." Another visitor, an older man with a weathered face and a walking stick carved with intricate patterns, arrived on a day when the valley was wrapped in a heavy mist. "I've heard of your teas," he said. "They say you make dreams come true." Maeve smiled gently. "Dreams are tricky things. Sometimes they lead us forward, and sometimes they lead us home." She guided him to a chair by the fire and prepared a blend with the mysterious dreamweaver herb. As the man sipped his tea, his weathered hands cradling the cup, he began to speak of his travels, the roads he had walked, and the places he had left behind. That night, he dreamed of his childhood home, a place he hadn't seen in decades. When he woke, the memory was so vivid that he resolved to visit it once more. "Thank you," he told Maeve before leaving. "Your tea showed me the way back to myself." As the seasons passed, the rhythm of life at the teamaker's cottage evolved with the changing landscape. Winter cloaked the valley in a blanket of snow, and the garden rested beneath its icy covering. Inside the cottage, Maeve brewed spiced teas that filled the air with warmth and comfort, the scent of cinnamon and cloves mingling with the crackle of the hearth. Travelers, bundled in thick coats, arrived with tales of snowstorms and the frozen beauty of the valley. In spring, the garden burst into life, a riot of colors and scents that heralded new beginnings. The teas took on a fresh, invigorating character, their flavors reflecting the vitality of the season. One visitor, a painter named Lydia, arrived on a day when the valley was bathed in a soft golden haze. Her thoughts were as scattered as the brushes she carried, weighed down by a creative block that had persisted for months. She longed to capture something she couldn't quite name, an elusive beauty that seemed forever out of reach. Maeve, sensing her unease, welcomed her with a warm smile and prepared a delicate blend of chamomile, lavender, and a touch of mint. As Lydia took her first sip, her mind began to clear, the tea's floral notes unraveling the tangles of doubt within her. She sat by the window, gazing at the rolling hills as if seeing them for the first time. Images began to flood her thoughts, the gentle curve of the valley, the way the mist clung to the trees, the vibrant hues of Maeve's garden. Lydia felt her hand twitch toward her sketch pad, and before she knew it, she was painting tirelessly. With each stroke of her brush, the tranquility of the cottage seemed to seep into her work, and by the end of her stay, she had created a series of pieces that radiated the spirit of the valley. When she departed, she left behind a small painting of the cottage, its hues glowing with an almost magical warmth, as a token of gratitude for the inspiration she had found. She carried an easel and a bundle of brushes, her hands stained with flecks of color. "I heard your tea captures the spirit of this valley," she said, her voice tinged with both excitement and fatigue. Maeve nodded knowingly and prepared a delicate blend of chamomile, lavender, and a touch of mint. As Lydia sipped, her eyes seemed to brighten, and she gazed out the window at the rolling hills. Over the next few days, she painted tirelessly, capturing the misty mornings, the blooming garden, and the tranquil spirit of the cottage. When she departed, she left behind a small painting of the cottage, its soft hues glowing with an almost magical warmth. Another arrival was Henry, a clockmaker with a knack for precision and a heart weighed down by loss. He had been wandering since the passing of his wife, unable to find solace in his craft. Maeve welcomed him with her usual calm and brewed him a robust tea infused with rosemary and sage. As he drank, he began to speak of the intricate clocks he once made and the silence that now filled his workshop. Maeve listened intently, her hands resting gently on the table. In the days that followed, Henry found himself drawn to the steady rhythm of the cottage. The ticking of an old clock on Maeve's mantel seemed to spark something within him. And by the time he left, he carried with him not just a pouch of tea, but a renewed desire to return to his craft. The cottage itself seemed to hold a kind of magic. Its stones glistened with dew in the early light, catching the soft golden rays of the sun as though each drop of moisture held a fragment of dawn's promise. The chimney puffed a welcoming curl of smoke, carrying with it the faint aroma of Maeve's latest brew. A scent that seemed to reach deep into the hearts of passers-by, coaxing forth memories and desires long buried. Visitors often described a peculiar sensation upon approaching the cottage, as though the very air around it whispered to their souls. Some felt an inexplicable calm wash over them, a sense of being drawn into an embrace they hadn't known they needed. Others spoke of a sudden clarity, a quiet voice within urging them forward. It was more than a place of respite. It was a mirror to one's innermost being, reflecting both wounds and the hope for healing. Maeve's cottage didn't just welcome visitors. It invited them to rediscover themselves. Maeve often said that the cottage chose who to call, and visitors frequently remarked on the strange pull that had drawn them there. Maeve, with her knowing smile, would simply nod, her wisdom as timeless as the valley itself. Among these visitors was a wanderer named Caleb. His boots bore the dust of distant lands, and his face carried the quiet weariness of someone who had seen much and spoken little of it. Unlike most who came to the cottage, Caleb brought no question, no burden. He simply asked if he could stay. Maeve, sensing his need for silence, offered him a room and a cup of tea. Days turned into weeks, and Caleb found himself falling into the rhythm of the cottage. He woke to the scent of fresh herbs drying by the window, spent his days tending the garden alongside Maeve, and ended each evening by the fire, cradling a cup of tea that seemed to hold the essence of the valley itself. The tea Maeve made for Caleb was unlike any other. It was a blend of lavender, sage, and a hint of dreamweaver. Caleb called it Valley's Whisper, a name that Maeve embraced with quiet delight. The blend seemed to anchor Caleb, its flavors weaving a thread of serenity through his restless thoughts. Each sip revealed a new layer of memory, a forgotten dream, or a fleeting glimpse of understanding. For Caleb, the tea was more than a drink. It was a journey inward. As the days stretched into months, Caleb began to write. His words spilled onto the pages of a worn leather journal, capturing the misty mornings, the harmonious cadence of the garden, and the quiet wisdom of the tea maker who had become his guide. Maeve, noticing his diligence, encouraged him with a gentle word or a fresh cup of tea. "Every story deserves to be told," she said, "and perhaps yours will carry the magic of this place to those who cannot come." Caleb's writings soon took the shape of poems and stories, each one a tribute to the valley and its timeless beauty. A young musician, Evie, arrived at the tea maker's cottage with little more than her cherished violin and a heart weighed down by doubt. The rigors of performing in bustling cities had left her soul weary, her once passionate melodies overshadowed by the relentless noise and expectations of the world she had long inhabited. Her music, which once soared freely, had become entangled in the pressures of perfection and recognition, leaving her uncertain if she could ever reclaim the joy it once brought her. As she stepped into the warm embrace of the cottage, the serenity of the place felt like a balm. Yet she hesitated, unsure if it was enough to quiet the storm within her. Maeve, with her quiet intuition, sensed the heaviness in Evie's heart. Without a word, she prepared a light floral tea, a blend of delicate lavender and chamomile. As the kettle began to sing, the gentle clink of cups and saucers harmonized with the rhythm of the crackling hearth. When Maeve placed the tea in front of Evie, the room seemed to hold its breath. The steam curled upwards, carrying the tea's calming aroma, filling the air with a soft, soothing energy that seemed to wrap itself around Evie like a tender embrace. With each sip, Evie felt a quietness settle within her, the chatter of self-doubt fading into the background. Later, drawn by the tranquil charm of the garden, Evie stepped outside, violin in hand. The valley stretched out before her, a mosaic of wildflowers, swaying grasses, and distant hills shrouded in a golden mist. Taking a deep breath, she raised her violin and let the bow touch the strings. At first, the notes were tentative, like a bird testing its wings, but soon they began to flow, soft and melodious, weaving themselves into the natural symphony of the valley. The rustle of leaves in the gentle breeze, the murmur of the brook winding its way through the meadow, and the distant calls of birds became her orchestra, each sound amplifying the purity of her music. As she played, Evie felt something shift. The notes she coaxed from her violin no longer carried the weight of expectation, but instead felt light, free, and infused with the spirit of the cottage and the land surrounding it. Her music became a dialogue with nature, a heartfelt conversation where she rediscovered the essence of why she had ever played in the first place. By the time she set her violin down, she had composed a new melody, a piece that seemed to capture the soul of the tea-maker's cottage itself. When it was time to leave, Evie lingered on the threshold, holding Maeve's hand with gratitude. She vowed to carry the melody she had written to every stage and every audience she encountered, a reminder of the peace and clarity she had found within these walls. As she walked away, the faint strains of her new composition seemed to echo in the valley, a parting gift from the cottage to the musician who had found her song again. As the seasons continued their cycle, the tea-maker's cottage stood as a beacon of solace and inspiration. Each visitor left with more than a pouch of tea. They carried with them a piece of Maeve's wisdom, her serene presence, and the transformative power of the valley. The whispers of Maeve's tea spread like the mist that lingered over the hills, drawing in more travelers who, in turn, became messengers of her quiet magic. Over time, the valley itself seemed to change, imbued with the stories of those who had visited the cottage. The wildflowers grew brighter, the air felt lighter, and even the birds' songs carried an inexplicable harmony. It was as though Maeve's influence had woven itself into the very fabric of the land, creating a sanctuary not just for those who arrived, but for the valley itself. Her teas, her stories, and the lives she touched became a tapestry of connection, reminding all who passed through that healing and discovery often began with the simplest of acts, a cup of tea and a moment of stillness. Thank you for joining us on The Tea-Maker's Cottage, a story of warmth, simplicity, and the quiet beauty of life's small pleasures. If you felt the calm and charm of this tale, consider giving it a thumbs up. Share it with friends and family who love relaxing stories, and don't forget to subscribe for more serene escapes every day. Wishing you peaceful nights and sweet dreams.